You talk a lot about emotional clearing as this is part of the divine path. You have to deal with your emotions. Is that true? You spend a lot of time getting people to get in touch with their emotions, and you say that this is how they will come to good health, and this is also how they will learn what it is to be loving in the divine sense.
Can I?
Was that something that you did in first century? Because there's not a lot of record of you doing that. Is this a new angle or
new and improved?
I'll dispute you about the first century for a start, but
okay.
we can talk about that after Mary's answer.
I feel the process of becoming at one with God is the same now as it was then, and I know that there's a lot of language, I suppose, surrounding us about emotional processing, clearing emotions, the different emotions, fear, anger, grief, and while I feel that's a really valuable aspect of what we're teaching, for me it's about a connection to our soul and a recognition that unless I connect with my soul, I can't connect with the creator of my soul. And my soul is inherently emotional. It's an emotional construct that God created. And unfortunately on the planet there are a lot of emotions within every soul that are out of harmony with love. But in my day-to-day life, I don't really have a focus on emotional processing. I have a focus on creating a connection with my Father, God, and in that process, I become emotional, and I ask God to remove from me the emotions which are in error and in disharmony with love. Now, in the first century that happened, but perhaps the language in which it's described, and even in the Paget messages, is a little different to the language that we use now. But it is essentially the same process. For one, if you think about emotions like greed and pride and jealousy, they're all things mentioned commonly in the Bible, I think, although I'm not au fait with the Bible as much as perhaps you both are. The true way to eradicate those things from our soul is an emotional way. So it can be done, if you like, from an intellectual sense, but the injury still exists within our soul. So that process, which I was a part of in the first century, of eradicating those things from my soul, was very emotional. But I didn't call it emotional processing at the time, you know.
It was more of a natural feeling.
It's a natural feeling, and honestly, the more that I connect to this longing for God, the process becomes emotional. And I'm sure many Christians have, and other people who desire to connect to God, of all religious and non-religious classical traditional religious groupings, would say it's a very emotional experience when one desires to connect with God. And I think that the reason we talk about emotions so commonly is that, and we use perhaps different language, is that we're trying to present it in a way that people can use and understand. For myself, I feel in terms of the way that I've been teaching about that is changing as I change and understand and remember my relationship with God in a lot more clarity. So in the past I was quite focused on emotions, and because I was shut down to this longing to God, that now I feel pulls me through emotions and into a lot of joy quite rapidly.
Yeah, I sort of go a bit further than Mary on the issue. I feel that one of the major impediments that mankind has today is the amount of effort we've spent shutting down the true condition of our heart. So in other words, most people in their day-to-day life falsify their true feelings and their true thoughts quite frequently. And we need to somehow help people to stop doing that, so that they become more truthful and more open and more honest about what they're really feeling and what they're really thinking. And to do that, we need to help them understand what's a true emotion and what's a fabricated emotion. And what I mean by that is that emotions like anger, for example, are fabrications of the denial of a deeper emotion. And usually, and it's well known now in psychological circles, that if a person's angry, they're usually quite afraid of something. And in their denial of their fear, they use anger as a method of controlling their fear-based response. And so there does need to be, to a degree, an understanding about emotions before a person can really understand what it means to be childlike in the manner in which they express their truth. In other words, the way they speak the truth and feel it. And I feel one of the primary impediments on the planet is that people don't know how to do that because we've been so far removed from it. And in removing ourselves from that, we've removed ourselves from the way in which we connect with God. And so for that reason, we've had to spend a bit of time, quite a few years of my time has been spent up to this point trying to help people work through the fact that when they're angry, they're actually denying something, for example. And when they're afraid, they're shutting down other emotions that they actually have. When they're afraid, they're shutting down desires that they actually feel. In other words, they're not doing the things they really want to do because they're afraid, and they need to deal with their fears and start working through their fears.
If they want to live in their desire.
If they want to live in a passionate life. And once they can at least start to understand that, then they can understand how God is involved in the process. They can begin to understand how to connect to God and ask for God's help to deal with these particular emotions. Now, in the first century, I used to talk about that quite frequently. I talked about the emotions of individuals, and the way that I confronted them mostly was by suggesting to them different actions that would confront those emotions. So if a man was rich and he was very afraid to give up his riches, I would suggest to him that he sells everything he has and gives it to the poor. But if a man was poor, then I would make a different suggestion to confront different emotions. If a person had a family, then I'd make a whole different set of conditions to deal with their emotions. And everything I suggested to them was about trying to confront their emotional condition. When you look at the Paget messages, I often refer in the Paget messages in my own writings to Paget, to passion, desire, longing, and those kind of emotions, the importance of having a development of passion and soul-based longing inside of yourself to follow a certain course of action, in this case towards God. And so we were often focusing on trying to help the person become more passionate, more loving, more longing in their soul, more desire. And this is what we're trying to do now. And the things that shut down desire and passion is primarily fear and grief. And our fear of our grief often is what prevents us from living a passionate life in the future. We've had negative things happen in the past, and that causes us then to be shut down to becoming open and passionate, desirous in our future. And so those emotions do need to be addressed if a person's ever going to become close to God.